The dense forest stretched endlessly before Aldrich, its towering trees casting long shadows as the fading light of dusk painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. A golden crown, hidden for centuries, called to him from the heart of the world's most dangerous lair. Aldrich had heard stories since childhood, the whispers of its power, of its ability to grant dominion over kingdoms. But now, standing at the edge of the wilderness, the weight of those tales felt more like a burden than a promise. His heart raced with excitement and fear, two emotions that seemed inseparable on this journey. "This is madness," he muttered, tightening his grip on the worn map in his hand. The path ahead would be treacherous, filled with unknown dangers. Yet the thought of the crown's power was enough to make him press forward. The sun sank lower, casting a reddish glow over the landscape. Aldrich had no choice but to move into the heart of the unknown, for the treasure that awaited him was a longing far stronger than any fear he felt. He glanced at the sky one last time, hoping for a sign, but the clouds hung heavy with uncertainty. His journey had begun, and there was no turning back now. The sky was now a blanket of deep blues and grays as Aldrich ventured deeper into the heart of the forest. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it a strange scent, something old, ancient, and unknowable. His steps faltered for a moment as his thoughts swirled around him. "This place, it feels alive," he muttered. The map in his hand seemed to grow heavier with each step, as if the weight of his quest was becoming too much to bear. He had read about the dragon's lair, but nothing had prepared him for the oppressive atmosphere that now surrounded him. The path narrowed, forcing him to move closer to the looming trees. Every crack of a twig, every rustling leaf seemed amplified, echoing in the silence. He could almost hear the whispers of the past, of those who had walked this path before him. His mind raced, filled with questions. Was this fate, or had he been lured into a trap? With a deep breath, he steadied himself. There was no turning back now. Aldrich's heart raced as the path grew narrower, the trees closing in, like ancient sentinels guarding a forbidden secret. His breath came in shallow gasps, the weight of the crown's legend pressing on his mind. In the distance, the sounds of the forest seemed to shift. Distant howls, strange calls, and the rustle of unseen creatures. Each sound seemed to echo, reverberating in the silence of the woods. The tension in his chest grew, a gnawing feeling that something was watching him. He stopped for a moment, feeling the cool wind brush against his skin, carrying with it a promise of danger. "Why did I come here?" he whispered, his voice trembling. The map had been clear, the lair was near. But the closer he came, the more it felt like he was being drawn into a trap. He shook his head, forcing himself to take another step forward. The forest around him seemed to whisper, but Aldrich couldn't make out the words. They were too distant, too cryptic. Was it the forest itself speaking, or was it his mind playing tricks on him? Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the forest, and with it came a strange chill. Aldrich froze, his skin prickling as the temperature dropped. He looked up, and for a split second, he thought he saw something move among the shadows. But when he blinked, it was gone. His pulse quickened. The silence returned, but it was no longer comforting. It was suffocating. The trees seemed to crowd in on him, their dark forms stretching higher and higher, as though they were trying to trap him in their embrace. With each step, the forest seemed to shift, as if the ground itself was changing beneath his feet. The familiar path was now nothing more than a memory. Was this some sort of illusion? Aldrich's grip on the map tightened as he pushed forward, refusing to let fear overcome him. The crown was close, he could feel it. But so was something else. A presence, dark and ancient, watching him from the depths of the woods. Aldrich took another cautious step forward, the tension in the air palpable. The feeling of being watched didn't dissipate. His mind raced, thoughts colliding as he wondered if he was truly alone. The whispering sounds grew louder, surrounding him in a symphony of murmurs that seemed to come from all directions. He reached for his sword, his hand trembling slightly. As he gripped the hilt, the rustling of the leaves intensified, almost as though they were alive, moving in time with his heartbeats. The trees now seemed to stretch their branches toward him, almost as if reaching out to stop him. He wanted to turn back, to flee, but the memory of the crown's promise drove him forward. Focus, Aldrich told himself, clenching his jaw. This is what you've come for. With renewed determination he took a deep breath and pressed onward, the path before him dark and uncertain. The wind howled, and somewhere deep in the forest, he could have sworn he heard a low growl, a sound that seemed to come from the very earth itself. Aldrich's journey through the forest seemed to stretch on endlessly, each step taking him deeper into the heart of a land he could barely understand. The trees around him were ancient, their bark thick and gnarled, their roots twisting like veins in the earth. The sounds of the forest were strange and unfamiliar. Every rustle of leaves seemed like a whisper, every crack of twigs a warning. The path ahead was less defined now, fading into the underbrush where the shadows seemed to grow longer with each passing minute. Aldrich paused for a moment, wiping the sweat from his brow. The weight of the map in his hand felt heavier with every step, and the sky above had turned a dull, oppressive gray. I didn't think it would be like this, he muttered to himself. The map had promised him clarity, but the deeper he ventured, the more lost he felt. His grip on the sword at his side tightened, knowing he had no choice but to continue forward. The golden crown, the prize he sought, awaited somewhere in this treacherous land, but would he be able to find it before the forest swallowed him whole? As Aldrich pushed forward, a voice suddenly broke through the silence, causing him to stop in his tracks. "Not many come this way," a gravelly voice called out from behind him. Aldrich turned swiftly, his hand instinctively going to his sword, but before he could react, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was an old man, hunched over with age, wearing tattered robes that blended seamlessly with the forest. His eyes glimmered with knowledge, and his long white beard swayed in the wind. "What brings you to these woods, boy?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying an authority that made Aldrich pause. The stranger's appearance was both unsettling and intriguing, and Aldrich couldn't help but feel that he was being measured, evaluated. "I seek the golden crown," Aldrich replied, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at him. The old man chuckled softly, his eyes gleaming with a knowing wisdom. "Many seek it," he said cryptically, "but not all are ready to find it." The old man stepped closer, his feet barely making a sound as he moved through the undergrowth. "The forest has its own rules," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "It does not give easily to those who seek its treasures." Aldrich's curiosity piqued, but he remained wary, keeping his distance. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone skeptical but eager for any information. The old man smiled knowingly. "The golden crown is not a gift, it is a test. It chooses those who are worthy, and those who are not." His eyes locked with Aldrich's, piercing through him as if he could see the very depths of his soul. "Are you prepared for the challenges ahead? Are you ready to face the truth about yourself?" The question hung in the air, thick with meaning. Aldrich hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing on him. Could he truly face whatever lay ahead? Or was he chasing an illusion? The old man's words echoed in Aldrich's mind long after the conversation had ended. The path ahead felt even more uncertain, but something in his gut told him that the stranger's words were true. The crown wasn't just a treasure, it was a trial, a judgment of his very worth. As he continued along the winding trail, Aldrich couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The forest seemed to be alive, its whispers growing louder, and the trees seemed to bend closer, as if drawing him into their dark embrace. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the air, and Aldrich spun around, sword drawn, but saw nothing. His breath quickened, his senses heightened. Was this part of the trial? Or was the forest simply playing tricks on his mind? With renewed resolve, Aldrich continued down the path, but now he was more aware of every sound, every shadow. The forest had become an enigma, one he had to solve before it consumed him entirely. As the path ahead grew darker, Aldrich began to question the wisdom of his quest. The forest had become a labyrinth of uncertainty, each turn leading to more questions and fewer answers. The further he went, the more it felt as if the forest was pushing him toward something he couldn't yet see. The golden crown was no longer just a treasure. It had become a symbol of everything Aldrich had ever wanted, and yet it was slipping further out of reach. "What am I doing here?" he muttered, his voice barely audible in the heavy silence. He stopped for a moment, his eyes scanning the darkening woods. It was then that he heard it, a faint sound, like a soft cry on the wind. He followed the sound, unsure of what he was chasing, but feeling an inexplicable pull. As he ventured further, the feeling that he was not alone grew stronger. The air grew colder as Aldrich pressed forward, the path narrowing further with each step. He could feel the weight of the crown pulling him deeper into the forest, but there was something more now, a stirring unease in his chest. The wind howled through the trees, and the once familiar rustle of leaves now sounded more like whispers, voices that seemed to echo through the woods, twisting in the wind. As Aldrich moved, the trees around him began to change. Their bark grew darker, their branches twisted into unnatural shapes, creating eerie shadows that danced along the path. He paused for a moment, glancing behind him, but the forest had become a maze, no clear path leading back. His only choice was to continue forward, though doubts began to gnaw at his mind. "This is foolish," he muttered, his voice shaking slightly. "There's no turning back." But even as he said it, he knew he would never go back. The pull of the golden crown was too strong. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, urging him onward. The question now was, what price would he have to pay? As Aldrich continued his journey, he began to notice strange symbols carved into the trees, ancient markings that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The deeper he ventured, the more he became aware of the tension building around him. It wasn't just the physical obstacles of the forest. There was something intangible, a force he could not name, pushing against him. Every step felt heavier, as if the forest itself was testing his resolve. His thoughts turned inward, and he began to question his motivations. Was it truly the crown he sought, or was it something else? Something darker, more selfish. The whispers in the wind seemed to mock him, each voice reminding him of the power he would wield if he succeeded. "Power," Aldrich repeated to himself, his voice distant. "That's all this is, isn't it?" But as he spoke the word, a sense of dread washed over him. The crown, the treasure he had pursued for so long, now seemed more like a trap, one that would consume him if he wasn't careful. The wind began to pick up, howling through the trees as the forest grew darker still. Aldrich's heart raced as he pressed forward, but something in the air had changed. The atmosphere had become thick with an unsettling stillness, broken only by the occasional crack of a branch or the rustle of unseen creatures. Suddenly, he heard a voice, clear and sweet, calling out from the distance. "Come, Aldrich," the voice said, its tone inviting, almost seductive. "Come to me, and all your desires will be fulfilled. Power, wealth, dominion, everything you've ever wanted." Aldrich stopped dead in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat. The voice was so familiar, yet distant, as if it came from the very heart of the forest. He took a step forward, then hesitated. Was this another test? Was he being lured into a trap? The temptation was strong, and for a moment he considered giving in. But as the voice called again, the words twisted into something darker, more insistent. "You're close, Aldrich. You need only accept me." Aldrich's heart pounded in his chest as the voice continued, its words like a magnetic pull drawing him in. He took a step forward, then another, his legs moving of their own accord. The path ahead was obscured by shadows, and the world around him seemed to distort with each passing moment. But then, just as he was about to step into the glowing mist, a loud crack echoed through the forest, followed by a roar that shook the ground beneath him. Aldrich froze, his sword instinctively raised. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a massive creature, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It was a beast of nightmares, its body covered in scales that shimmered like molten metal. Its wings unfurled, casting a shadow over the entire clearing. Aldrich stood paralyzed for a moment, But then the creature's voice rumbled through the air, deep and menacing. "You are not ready for what lies ahead," it growled. "Turn back or face the consequences." Aldrich's grip on his sword tightened, and for a brief moment he considered running. The creature before him was too powerful, too terrifying. But something inside him resisted, something deeper than fear, a drive he could not deny. "I will not turn back," Aldrich said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming fear he felt. The creature growled, its wings rustling ominously. "You are a fool," it hissed, its voice like the scraping of metal. "You are not ready for the trials that await you." But Aldrich did not move. His mind was focused, his heart pounding with a newfound resolve. He could feel the power of the golden crown drawing nearer, and despite the danger, he knew that he had to face whatever lay ahead. The creature roared again, and in that instant, Aldrich rushed forward, his sword raised, ready to face whatever challenge awaited him. The time for hesitation was over. The forest began to change, as Aldrich ventured deeper into the heart of the dark woods. The towering trees gradually parted, and the oppressive mist began to lift. In its place, a vast, desolate clearing stretched out before him, a landscape barren of life, yet unnaturally still. A jagged mountain rose in the distance, its peak shrouded in thick clouds. It was there, the dragon's lair. Aldrich could feel the weight of the air growing heavier as he approached the entrance. The ground beneath him was cracked, scorched in places, as if the earth itself had been burned by some ancient force. The trees around the clearing were twisted and charred, their branches gnarled like the fingers of a long-dead creature. A faint, sulphurous smell lingered in the air, and the wind carried a low rumbling growl that seemed to emanate from the mountain itself. Aldrich's heart raced. He had reached the threshold of the dragon's domain. There would be no turning back now. Aldrich stepped into the clearing, the weight of the air pressing down on him. Each step felt like it was leading him closer to the heart of something ancient and terrifying. The growl of the mountain grew louder, vibrating through the ground beneath him. Suddenly, a massive shape appeared in the distance, its silhouette outlined by the dark sky. A pair of glowing eyes pierced the gloom, and Aldrich froze, his breath caught in his throat. The dragon was real. Its body coiled around the mountain like a serpent, scales gleaming in the dim light. It was a creature of nightmares, enormous, with wings that could darken the sky and claws capable of rending stone. As the creature unfurled itself, the earth trembled beneath its weight. "You dare enter my domain?" The dragon's voice rumbled, deep and ancient. "What is it you seek, mortal?" Aldrich's heart pounded in his chest as the dragon's eyes bore into him. The creature's voice reverberated through the ground, shaking Aldrich's very bones. But despite the fear gnawing at his insides, Aldrich stood his ground. "I seek the golden crown," he said, his voice steady, though his hands were clenched around his sword. The dragon's eyes narrowed, its lips curling into a wicked smile. "The golden crown," it hissed, "is not a mere trinket for a mortal to possess. It is a test, a trial to see if you are worthy of its power." The dragon's wings unfurled with a deafening roar, and Aldrich felt the wind rush past him as the creature rose into the air. "To claim it," the dragon continued, "you must prove yourself worthy. Only those who understand the true nature of power can wield it." The ground trembled once more as the dragon landed, its massive claws sinking into the earth. "Do you understand, mortal?" The dragon's words echoed in Aldrich's mind, the weight of them sinking deep into his soul. Understand the true nature of power. He had heard this before, in whispers on the wind, in the warnings of those who had sought the crown before him. The path to the golden crown was never about strength alone. It was about wisdom, sacrifice, and the willingness to face the truth. As the dragon continued to speak, Aldrich's mind raced. What was the true nature of power? Was it strength, as he had always believed? Or was it something more elusive, something that required him to give up his ego, his desires, his need for control? "I understand," Aldrich said quietly, the words leaving his lips before he could fully comprehend their meaning. The dragon paused, its head tilting as it studied him. Then, with a deep growl, it spoke once more. "Very well, mortal. Your trial has begun." With a flick of its massive tail, the dragon disappeared into the shadows, leaving Aldrich alone in the clearing. Aldrich stood alone in the clearing, the weight of the dragon's challenge pressing heavily on his mind. The air was thick with the dragon's power, and for a moment Aldrich felt as though the ground beneath him might swallow him whole. But then, as he stood there in the silence, something inside him shifted. The fear that had gripped him earlier began to dissolve, replaced by a deep sense of clarity. He had come this far, and he would not be undone by fear or doubt. The golden crown awaited, but Aldrich knew that it was not the end of the journey. It was the beginning of something far greater. "I will prove myself worthy," he whispered to the winds that still howled around him. The mountain loomed in the distance, dark and imposing, but Aldrich no longer saw it as an obstacle. It was a challenge to be faced, and he would face it with all the courage he could muster. The air around Aldrich grew heavy with anticipation, the silence of the clearing pressing in on him as he stood alone in the shadow of the mountain. His mind raced with doubts, the dragon's words echoing in his ears. "Do you understand the true nature of power?" For so long, Aldrich had sought the golden crown, believing it was the key to control, to dominion over his future. But now, as he stood at the threshold of the dragon's lair, he questioned everything. Was this what he had really wanted? The crown had once represented victory, the culmination of a dream that would grant him unimaginable power. Yet now it felt like a trap, a false promise that would cost him more than he was willing to pay. He could feel his resolve wavering, the clarity he'd gained starting to slip away. "What if I'm not ready?" Aldrich whispered to himself. "What if this isn't the path I was meant to take?" The path ahead was uncertain, and with every step, his belief in his purpose seemed less sure. As Aldrich stood there lost in thought, a voice suddenly called out to him, breaking the silence. "You're not alone," the voice said, soft and distant, yet unmistakably clear. Aldrich's head snapped up, searching for the source, but the clearing remained empty. His heart pounded in his chest as the voice continued, now louder, clearer. "You have always been your own greatest enemy." The words stung, each one cutting deeper than the last. Aldrich took a step back, his breath catching in his throat. This voice was not the dragon's, nor was it a distant echo. It felt like it was coming from within him, a reflection of his own fears. His hand instinctively went to his sword, though there was no threat. "No," Aldrich muttered, shaking his head. "I am not my own enemy." But even as he spoke, the words, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was truth in them. His desire for the crown, his relentless pursuit of power, had it all been rooted in something darker than he was willing to admit? The voice continued to echo in Aldrich's mind, growing louder and more insistent. "You are not ready, Aldrich. You seek power to fill the emptiness within you, but that emptiness will never be filled. The crown will not give you what you seek." Aldrich's hands trembled as he gripped his sword tighter, trying to block out the voice, but it refused to be ignored. "You are running from yourself," the voice whispered, its tone both accusing and pitying. "The crown will only amplify what is already inside you. Your desire, your need for control, those are the things that will consume you." Aldrich's breath quickened, the weight of the voice's words sinking in. He had always believed that the crown would bring him peace, but now he wasn't so sure. The more he thought about it, the more he wondered if he had been chasing a lie all along. "What have I become?" Aldrich whispered, his voice breaking. His doubt now seemed insurmountable, the weight of his own fears threatening to crush him. Aldrich sank to his knees in the clearing, overwhelmed by the weight of his doubt. The voice had stopped, but the questions it left behind gnawed at him, relentless and unforgiving. Was the crown really worth it? Was it truly the answer he had been searching for, or was it simply a symbol of his own insecurities and fears? "I came here to prove myself," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "to show that I could be something more." But now, standing on the precipice of everything he had sought, Aldrich wasn't sure what was real anymore. Had his journey always been about power? Or had it been about finding something inside himself that he could not see? The air was still, too still, and the silence stretched out around him, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Aldrich closed his eyes, wondering if it was time to walk away, to turn back and abandon the quest that had consumed his life for so long. Aldrich remained kneeling in the clearing, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. But as he sat in the silence, a strange peace began to settle over him. The doubts did not disappear, nor did the fears, but something within him shifted. Perhaps the crown was not the key to everything he had wanted, but maybe there was something more to be found in this moment of reflection. "I will find my own path," Aldrich said, his voice steady for the first time in days. "I do not need the crown to define me." With that, he stood, his body still trembling, but with a newfound sense of clarity. The trials of the forest, the dragon's challenge, they had not been about power. They had been about understanding who he truly was. And in this moment, Aldrich understood. He was no longer just a man seeking power. He was a man seeking truth, seeking peace. And he would find it, not in the crown, but in the choices he made from this point forward. The silence in the clearing felt different now. The weight of Aldrich's doubts had lifted. For the first time he understood, the journey had always been about him. The golden crown was never the answer. It was the strength he found within himself. "I see now," he whispered. The path was never about power. It was about understanding. He took a step forward, his gaze now steady and calm, not toward the crown, but toward his own truth. Aldrich walked forward, feeling a sense of freedom he had never known. The forest, once foreboding, now seemed welcoming. "This is the way," Aldrich whispered, a calm certainty in his voice. "No longer bound by fear, I am free." The golden crown no longer mattered. What mattered now was the peace he had found within himself, and the path ahead was clear. Reaching the base of the mountain, Aldrich felt the earth hum beneath him, resonating with ancient power. "I don't need the crown," he said aloud, his voice steady and filled with truth. "I have already found what I needed." His journey wasn't about the crown or power. It was about the lessons he had learned and the man he had become. The ground trembled slightly as the dragon's voice resonated, but this time there was no fear. "You have faced yourself, Aldrich," it rumbled. "You have passed the trial. The crown you sought is not one of power but of understanding. The greatest strength lies within." Aldrich stood still, absorbing the dragon's words. He understood now, true strength came not from the crown, but from mastering oneself. The dragon faded into the mist, leaving Aldrich alone at the entrance of the lair. "I am at peace," Aldrich whispered, a soft smile forming on his face. He had found the true treasure, not in the crown, but in the clarity of his heart. His journey had been one of self-discovery, and now he was free. The mountain no longer loomed as an obstacle, but as a part of his path forward. Aldrich stood at the foot of the mountain, the entrance to the dragon's lair now open before him. The journey had brought him here, not to claim the golden crown, but to confront his own truths. The air was thick with anticipation, yet there was no fear. The last trial awaited, but Aldrich was no longer the same man who had entered the forest. The shadows of his past had been shed, and what remained was clarity. As he stepped forward into the darkness of the lair, the dragon's presence filled the space, but now, Aldrich felt no terror, only understanding. "You are ready," the dragon's voice rumbled, echoing off the walls. The challenge that had once seemed insurmountable was now merely another part of his journey. Aldrich had faced every obstacle within himself. Now, he would face whatever came next with an open heart. As Aldrich entered the lair, the air grew warmer, charged with ancient power. The ground beneath his feet hummed with energy. In the center of the vast cavern, the dragon awaited, its massive form coiled in a way that was no longer menacing, but majestic. Its eyes locked onto Aldrich's, glowing with ancient wisdom. "You have come far," the dragon said, its voice a deep rumble. "But your greatest trial is yet to come, to claim the true power of the crown. You must confront yourself one final time. Aldrich nodded, his breath steady. He had already faced his doubts, his fears, and his desires. This final challenge was not to conquer, but to embrace. I am ready, he said, his voice firm. I am not here to claim power but to understand it. The dragon's eyes gleamed. Then you shall have it. The dragon slowly unfurled its wings, and a soft, radiant light began to fill the cavern. The shadows that had once felt oppressive now seemed to fade, replaced by an aura of calm energy. The crown is not a symbol of dominance, Aldrich, the dragon said, its voice resonating with clarity. It is a symbol of balance. To wield it is not to rule, but to understand the true nature of the world and your place within it. As the light grew brighter, Aldrich felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. The dragon's words resonated within him, each syllable like a truth he had always known but never fully understood. The crown had never been about power. It was about understanding the impermanence of all things and embracing the present moment. I understand, Aldrich said softly. It was never about control. It was always about acceptance. The light from the dragon's wings enveloped Aldrich, filling him with warmth and understanding. The Lair, once a place of dread, now felt like a sanctuary. You have embraced the truth, the dragon intoned. Now the crown is yours, not to rule but to serve. It will guide you, Aldrich, but only if you continue to seek the wisdom of your heart. Aldrich reached out, and in that moment, the golden crown appeared before him, glowing softly, its beauty not in its gold, but in its simplicity. He lifted it gently, but it no longer felt like an object of power. It felt like a gift, a reminder of everything he had learned. With the crown in his hands, Aldrich knew he was no longer bound by the quest for power. His true journey had been about finding peace, understanding, and the balance within himself. As the light faded and the dragon's form began to dissipate into the mist, Aldrich stood alone, the golden crown now resting lightly in his hands. He looked out from the Lair's entrance, the vast landscape before him, and for the first time he felt complete. I am not defined by this crown, he said, his voice filled with peace. I define myself. The journey had never been about the destination, but about the person he had become. The dragon, the forest, the trials, they had all been a reflection of his inner struggles. And now, standing in the light of dawn, Aldrich understood. The greatest treasure had always been his own transformation. As he stepped out of the lair and into the morning light, Aldrich smiled, knowing that the path ahead was his to walk, not as a conqueror, but as a man at peace with himself.